Today, for today's webinar, we've got a great one for you. Talk about it Tuesday. We are going to focus on getting ready for the start of your season. So I've got the good fortune of having two great panelists with us today. And so I will start by introducing them, and we'll kind of get the process started. Please feel free to include any of your questions at any time in the chat box. First of all, we have James Russomano, or Jimmy. Jimmy is the manager of education for sports safety at HSS. Jimmy began his career as a strength and conditioning coach with college basketball, hockey, and football players at Michigan State University and Villanova University. He continued his career at the University of Illinois, where he worked with basketball and baseball players, gymnasts, swimmers, and divers. After spending several years working with college athletes, Jimmy spent 2 years working for the United States Tennis Association at the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center in Flushing, New York. While at the National Tennis Center, he oversaw the training of about 500 youth and high school tennis players per year and managed the fitness in the Arthur Ashe Stadium during the U.S. Open tournament. In all of his different roles working with athletes of all ages and levels, Jimmy found the fundamental movement education was lacking. Jimmy was hired to manage the HSS Sports Safety Program in 2017 to help deliver important education to athletes around the world to help improve their movement quality and reduce their risk of injury. Jimmy, thank you for joining us. As well, we have Bob Harris, who is the Fitness Center Director at Lehman College. Bob Harris has been the Fitness Center Manager at Lehman College's Apex Fitness Center since the building opened in 1994. In addition to managing day-to-day operations with the Apex Fitness Center and free weight room, Bob provides assistance and support to Lehman College head coaches and athletes with their development of year-round strength and conditioning programs. Bob is also an adjunct professor with Lehman College's exercise science program, where he regularly teaches exercise testing and prescription to both undergraduate and graduate students. Prior to Lehman College, Bob served as the director of the Fitness Center and Wellness Program at Diversified Investment Advisors, formerly Mutual of New York in Westchester County. Bob holds a BS in physical education from SUNY Cortland and a master's in kinesiology from the University of Connecticut. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Is there anything you guys would like to add as we begin on this webinar?
I'm ready to go if Jimmy wants to start up, but maybe I'll start off by talking about the CUNY student athlete. First, let me say thank you to the CUNY Athletic Conference for inviting me here. I'm happy to be here to promote the 30-day Motion Health Challenge with Jimmy. The CUNY athlete is obviously driven to succeed. They're students first, but they're driven on the court or whatever field surface they're playing on. A lot of our athletes train year-round. As soon as the season ends, oftentimes they'll meet with their coaches to find out, what they need to do to take their game to the next level, and then they'll almost immediately start training. So normally in our athletic facilities throughout CUNY, we would see a whole lot of our student athletes training and trying to, get better. They'll be in the free weight room, they'll be in the cardio center, they'll be working on their skill development. But of course, this is not normal times, and kind of our athletes are in a little bit of a state of limbo because we don't have fall semester sports. Our facilities are not right now available to our athletes. So a lot of them are looking for direction and some structure. And I think the 30-day Motion Health Challenge can provide that for them. And I look forward to talking with Jimmy about it today.
Great, Bob. Thank you. Jimmy?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. It's really, it's so great to hear about what makes the CUNY student athlete such a special group. And I think something that's important about our program is we know that you're student athletes and students first. And so we don't want to just tell you what to do and expect that you're going to follow along. we want to explain why what we're doing is so important, so that you have all of the knowledge possible to go out and use this program or prepare yourself for your upcoming season, whenever that may be, to the best of your ability. Because I think it's always important that we understand why we're doing something. We don't just kind of follow the leader. So we want to make sure that you're informed as to why this program is important and what it can do to help you.
Great. Thank you, Jimmy. Jimmy, we're going to give you a chance towards the end to talk about the program at HSS, but I wanted to get started and throw some questions at both of you guys. And these are some of the questions that student athletes have been asking previous to this. And remember, for those of you who are joining us on the webinar, feel free to ask questions in the chat. Jimmy, we'll start with you. Is it safe to run with a mask on?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a different answer for everyone, and there's a whole lot of research that's still yet to be done. But I think, just like anything else, I think back to my experience as a football player. Those first couple of weeks with a helmet on is such a change from like normal running or normal weightlifting. It's just a new piece of equipment that your body's not totally used to. So I guess my best advice is that athletes take it slowly and kind of start preparing themselves, maybe wearing a mask a little bit at a time, and ultimately, getting to the point where they feel a lot more comfortable wearing it.
Great. Bob, do you?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, like the NCAA resocialization of athletes, their most recent statement, they talked about the use of the mask and the use of the mask heavily. But they basically talked about it off the court or off the field, and saying how important it was when the athlete comes off the field that they needed to put the mask on before they interact with their coaches. So that it doesn't seem like the NCAA is expecting athletes to wear a mask. And I agree that as far as the safety issue, I certainly wouldn't want to provide medical advice, but we do have a lot of athletes in the Apex Center using those restrictive air masks, which cuts down on the volume of the air. They use it as a training tool. So I think, safety is one thing, and then convenience and annoyance is another thing, like Jimmy was talking about the helmet. Is it realistic to expect somebody to work out and start sweating heavily with a mask, and then have that mask stay on and be effective at all? I just don't know. And if you're running outside with a mask and you're not near anybody, you probably don't need to wear a mask, because the mask is to protect others and such. So, I think all of the CUNY schools are going to establish their own policies on masks inside their facilities, though. So.
Yeah, and Bob, that seems to be pretty consistent with the pro sports that have been able to get back online. With looking at like what they did in Spain from the ACB level, or now the NBA, and just the various soccer leagues that have begun to return to competition around the globe. So a lot of these questions are, for athletes, our student athletes here at CUNY, who are very routine orientated. And so I think a lot of these questions are going to speak to how to develop a new routine in towards getting ready. Bob, we're going to start with you on this question. Is working out in the morning better for you versus another time of
the day? Well, I'm a morning person, so for me it is better. Okay. I like to get out in the morning. I typically go for a pretty vigorous hike. And I do it in the morning because I know that if I get up and go do that, nothing's going to get in the way of it. So, I won't have unscheduled events or something come up that kind of gets in the way, or maybe my energy level drops down and I just kind of get lazy and don't do it. So I try to get that out of the way early because I know it's important. I don't think it matters from a result standpoint. There's other people that are not morning people. They just don't want to get out of bed and, go for a run or go lift weights or something. They're just not ready for that. They'd rather get into their daily routine and then kind of have their workout in the afternoon. If you look at most exercise facilities, it's a little quieter in the morning, so most people are not working out in the morning. They tend to get a little bit busier in the afternoon after work. Sometimes, the morning is all you can do is get yourself ready for whatever your day looks like, and then you hopefully plan to work out in the afternoon. From an effect standpoint, I don't think it matters though, as long as you do it.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Jimmy, your thoughts on that question?
I would agree completely with Bob. I like to get into that routine and start early before there could be any other sort of distraction.
Okay, great. So the next question that we had sent to us was, should I approach my session with a plan? And kind of, can you guys talk about a little bit about planning? I think one of the things for athletes right now is, talking about that peak time, right? You're training in the off season to get you through the preseason to be at your best level when competition starts. And now with competitions being canceled or pushed back, how do you maximize that time, especially when you look at some of our athletes who are trying to peak at just that exact moment and have been working towards that? Jimmy, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think you have to have a plan. Why go into a session without a plan? I know you're not always going, maybe you want to lift a certain amount of weight or you want to run for a certain amount of distance and maybe you just don't get there. But I think it's always great to have a plan. Just like you said, a lot of the athletes are routine oriented. And so I think having a plan is the best way to stick to that routine. And from one week to the next, you can look back at the plans you'd already made and say, oh, well, I'm seeing progress, or maybe you're not, something else needs to change.
So as a follow-up to that, and I'll kick this to Bob. So how would you advise an athlete who has had to change their whole cycle of training based on this COVID response?
Yeah, and we don't know how much time is left before they have to actually where they're actually able to get back into a routine. So they're not quite there yet. But I think once they can get to that point, if they can have some assessments done, maybe figure out where they are physically, what their weaknesses are, and then look at the time remaining and make some realistic goals in terms of, what can you accomplish in that time, and then set up a plan to go about it.
Great. So this follow-up question, guys, is, do I need to work out every day? And obviously this, speaks to the aforementioned issue we talked about with our student athletes in their competition schedule being adjusted here.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. I think we may have a distorted view of what a workout looks like. I think for a long time, for many of us, it was going to a fitness center or a commercial gym, and suddenly that rug has just been swept out from underneath us. And so it kind of had to shift our perspective on what is a workout. But I think physical activity every day is absolutely important. You think back to, I know we have college athletes here, but think back to your days in phys ed and in high school and middle school. The more the better. It's a great way to kind of let out some energy and kind of clear your head. So I think there's absolute benefits to physical activity. Bob said he likes to start out with a hike. I think because he's not, lifting weights or he's not in a gym, somebody might not call that a workout. But I think Bob and I would disagree it's certainly a workout. But anyway, being stuck inside for the last 4 months, any chance to get out and go walk or run or ride my bike, I've tried to take advantage just to keep my mind clear. But then when it comes to training for your sport, I think you need to take it slowly. If you haven't exercised, if you haven't lifted weights or gone for an intense run in a couple of months, every day is probably not the best thing for you to do right now. I would think that you probably want to go every other day or even every third day until your body starts to adapt. So taking it slowly and listening to your body would probably be my best advice.
Yeah, that's great advice. I've got a question from Julia Catone, who wrote in, and she asked, what is the best way to work on the dynamic of your team if you can't physically train with them, especially if you have a new freshman coming in and you can't start preseason and things like that on time. I know for the wheelchair basketball program at CUNY, we've done a lot of things through Zoom, but that has been one of the issues with, you know, getting people the right equipment and being very limited. Bob, we'll start with you, and then Jimmy, what are your guys' thoughts on that question?
Well, I certainly would encourage all the coaches to meet regularly with their student athletes, to stay connected in that way via Zoom or email or what have you, and then get some resources together that you can suggest to athletes in terms of a workout regimen. Doesn't have to be the most vigorous workout that you might have normally. But you're really not trying to recreate what you could do in your exercise facilities. You're trying to get them active in some way. Certainly the 30-day motion health challenge will get them going, doing something, feeling like they can do that. So I think if you could get your team participating in this challenge, that would be a good bonding issue for you guys. And then after that, you could develop some sort of training program using outdoor recesses. If you have any of those kind of outdoor gyms or open fields, you could put together some sports-specific drills or pick some calisthenics that kind of seem like they mimic some of the movement patterns with your sport. But just getting the athletes together and I suggest getting them involved in this challenge would be a great way to get things going right now.
Great. Jimmy, why don't we, Bob's mentioned it a couple of times. Why don't we give you a chance to share this challenge to break up some of this question and answering, and then we can continue from there.
Sure. Well, if I can take you back a bit, Ryan, what I'd like to do is kind of talk about sports and injuries, because that's really where this whole thing came from. And if you think about right now, we probably have the lowest injury rates as a result of sports than we've ever had in the history of organized sports. Nobody's getting hurt because nobody's playing. And so it makes you think, well, does playing sports directly lead to risk of injury? And the answer could be yes, but it doesn't have to be. And so we want athletes to be able to participate in sports without that risk of injury. And so I think about all of the CUNY student athletes who've been just kind of anxiously waiting for the start of their season. Just about the worst thing that could happen is that one of those athletes goes on to suffer, a potential season-ending injury, or even just an injury that sidelines them for a couple weeks. Like, we've been waiting for so long, and it would be so hard to get over dealing with an injury after this long wait. So our focus is on getting you back to sports and letting you play sports with a lower risk of injury. And so when we think about our health and everything it takes to be an athlete, we think about aerobics. We think about making sure that our lungs and heart can handle the demands of the season. But something that we often forget is what's our movement quality like? How do we move? And so, if you've ever, I was not a pitcher, that's for sure, growing up, but I was a first baseman probably throw the ball less than anybody on a baseball field. But if I was to step on the mound and try to pitch a ball, the likelihood that I would get hurt doing so is so much higher because I don't have the technique necessary to do it. And so we think about all of the practice you put into your sport, that you work on improving the skills in your sport. If you're a soccer player, it's all the footwork you do with the ball. If you're a basketball player, dribbling and footwork, of course, as well. But there are fundamental movements that we practice every day that you probably don't even realize. Things like running and jumping, squatting, cutting, decelerating, accelerating, all of these skills that require constant practice. You can't just do them, you have to do them the right way, and you have to continue to practice so that you can maintain control of your body. So this 30-day motion health challenge is basically taking a group of athletes who've done maybe very little athletically over the last 4 months, starting them from square one, that's day one. And by day 30, getting them back to a place where they're ready for their preseason. We're not even talking about their season, really where they're ready for their first day of practice. Because all of the things, all those routines that your CUNY athletes have, they've been disrupted in one way or another. And so we want to get them back into that routine. We want to get them moving well. We want them to hear from qualified coaches so that when they get back on campus and they're in front of someone like Bob, they have all of those good movement patterns. They can do everything proficiently, so their risk of injury will be significantly lower.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Jimmy. I'm going to this question because this kind of is a great follow-up, and this came from one of our student athletes who's viewing the webinar. What is the best way to get back to working out and practicing after staying in a long time in quarantine, and how can we adapt our bodies after a long break? And so I think you've kind of answered that, Jimmy and Bob, but why don't you guys speak to that a little more specifically here?
Well, I would just say, you've got to start out conservatively. You've got to, know that you haven't been training, and the fastest way to hurt yourself is to try to do too much too fast and try to catch up. You're better off, not. One of the pluses of this motion health challenge is that it does start off at a, I don't even want to say conservative level, but it builds from day to day to day. So, everybody can, decrease their risk of injury from training if they start off at a level and then not try to, just because you felt good after the first day, you don't double your workout the next day. You want to have, gradual progression as you start to get back out into workout mode.
Great. Jimmy, do you have thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I would totally agree with Bob. I think of runners who often follow this 10% rule, where they won't do more than 10% of what they had done the previous week. So if I wanted to go run 10 miles this week, well, I better have run 9 miles last week, or my body may not be ready to handle it. And so you just think from one week to the next, am I doing too much? So am I doing no more than 10% of what I did last week? It's a great way to kind of ease yourself in without biting off too much in the beginning.
And you can use that 10% rule a bunch of different ways. Like if you're lifting weights, is it 10% of the actual weight that you're lifting, or 10% of the volume that you're working out for the week? So, you sort of got to, it's a great 10% rule to give you some guidance to doing that. And then just keep checking back with how you feel, with that. Sometimes you might have to take a step back in order to keep moving forward.
Great. So a follow-up that I would have is, with athletes, it's all about that rest and recovery, right? And especially after a long layoff, gearing your body up, and this 30-day challenge helps with that. But can you talk about, ways to rest and speak to rest and recovery in the confines of what we have now? I mean, we don't have a lot of the resources that some of our student athletes that are accustomed to. So any advice on that stuff?
I think every athlete is going to be a bit different. For example, when I don't do my workout in the morning, if I do it in the afternoon or evening, I know that it messes with my sleep, because I can feel that my heart rate is a little bit faster when I'm trying to go to bed, and I just can't fall asleep. And so I try to be aware of that and shift to my schedule so that I can get my training done earlier in the morning. But the same goes for the way that you eat or the way that you hydrate yourself. Just like Bob said, listen to your body, and I think it'll tell you exactly what you need. If your legs are feeling really tired, maybe give them a day to recover. Especially as we get back into this, it's going to be worth taking your time getting back to that level of fitness that you need for your sport, as opposed to rushing back in and ending up on the sidelines with an injury.
Yeah, I just think a lot of athletes need to pay more attention to the rest factor. It's so important in the body being able to recover and get ready for the next workout. Um, so don't think that you're being lazy because you're taking a day off. It's important when your body says you need it.
Great. So, as a follow-up to that, can both of you kind of discuss the importance of stretching or different prehab measures as our student athletes begin to start this process again?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk. The word prehab is an interesting word. It's kind of that thought of like, what can I do before I get hurt to avoid getting hurt in the first place? And that's really what our program is all about. So while we're not really so focused on stretching, it's those things like practicing your running technique and making sure that you're comfortable decelerating and landing after a big jump. Those things to me are some of the most important things you can do as prehab. Because if your body is under your control, if your brain is able to tell your muscles exactly what it wants them to do and when it wants them to do that, it prevents you from ending up in an awkward position where you might get yourself hurt. And so to us, that's probably the most important sort of prehab that we ask athletes to do.
Yeah, and I know in the space that I work in with our adaptive athletes, we'll do a lot with shoulders, right? We'll do the therabands, we'll do just kind of the empty cans and all those rotator cuff muscles, just because it's such a heavy impacted area for our athletes, and especially since a lot of them aren't able to do the requisite pushing or running that the athletes would do. So it's one of the things we're advising our student athletes pretty heavily on. Bob, your thoughts?
Well, I just find stretching, other than a dynamic workout, warm up before your workout, I find stretching to be most helpful probably after the workout. Where
Okay.
if you're looking to make gains in flexibility, that's probably when you want to do some static stretching after the workout. Where you can, maybe decrease your risk of soreness a little bit, but do some static stretching. Go to a tight point and hold for 20, 30 seconds. Repeat that a couple of times, and then you might help yourself with a little bit of extra flexibility. That's really my take on stretching.
Okay, thank you. So, Bob, we'll start with you on this question. So, obviously, our athletes are going to be gearing up, and being a part of this 30-day challenge, we hope, and starting little by little to get them ready for whatever their preseason might look like. What would be the best way for them to combat kind of those sore muscles? And I know we've touched upon it a little bit about listening to your body and starting slow. But what are some other tips that you would give them so they're not in a situation to like what Jimmy mentioned, where they've been on this long layoff and then they come in and they pick up a nagging injury right away?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about does kind of address that. Some people like to use foam rollers, to kind of give yourself a little bit of muscle massage, which might ease some of that muscle tension. But really, you can sometimes the best way to alleviate soreness is to follow that maybe too vigorous a workout with maybe not a full rest, but a light workout. Get that blood flow going and stimulate those muscles. Maybe get rid of some of the toxins that have built up and such, and just get your body moving again, and and sometimes that alleviates it.
Great. Jimmy, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would. Again, I would totally agree with Bob. I always think that swimming and cycling are great of exercise if you do have some soreness, because they typically don't create a ton of soreness because there's no eccentric phase of either of those. And I know it's kind of a scientific word, but that part where you're lowering down with the squat, if you've got all that weight on your back, that can be where a lot of the soreness comes from. And so if we have something like swimming or riding a bike, you don't really get that, and it's a whole lot more of a dynamic movement.
Okay, great. So one of our attendees has asked, when will the 30-day challenge be posted? Jimmy, that's to you. And I know you have a video. Why don't we give you some time to share, and we can get some response from our folks on the webinar about the program.
Sure. So I will answer before I play the video that it has actually been up now for about 2 or 3 weeks. We've had some large groups of high school athletes that have taken the challenge, and I think we're getting some pretty awesome results. So I'm going to play this, and just keep in mind that you'll be able to register as soon as right now if you'd like. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. Sharing sound. So if I have another second, what I'll do is I'll show you, once you get to our website, I know that the link has been shared with you, and I think you'll have another chance to see it after the webinar. But anyway, so you'll get to our website and you'll see that the 30-Day Motion Health Challenge is our featured class. And so once you've signed up, it's completely free. You don't need to put any credit card or personal information, except maybe for your email address. But once you're signed up, you'll see that you have access to day one, which will take you through a couple self-assessments, a couple lessons that we like to teach that we think are really important before you get started. So day one actually ends up taking you about 40 minutes, but every day from that point forward, it is closer to about 15 minutes. And you see that it goes on for about exactly 30 days. And each day alternating between core, upper, and lower body workouts. So you kind of get everything covered there.
Great. And so just a question that's come up here in the chat. This is a free program. All you have to do is sign up, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Great. So a lot of support in the chat for the webinar for anything that's free right now, which is maybe more a sign of the times, right, guys?
Yeah. We have a very generous funder to our program. Their only interest is that we have less young, that being middle, high school, and college athletes coming to the hospital as patients. And so we're very lucky that we're able to offer all of this stuff at no cost, simply because they want you all to be out playing sports and not stuck in a hospital room or stuck in your apartment recovering from an injury.
Great. What is the, so you talked about how you're constantly seeing young athletes, whether that's high school or collegiate athletes. What is, a couple of the most common injuries that you see, and some different ways to maybe prevent those injuries from
I think the one that probably stands out to everybody is the ACL injury. It's especially common among our basketball, football, soccer, lacrosse player, field hockey player. And 70% of those injuries are actually non-contact in nature. which means that something is happening with that athlete and nobody else is playing a role in this. So we think that it's related to movement quality. It typically happens during an awkward landing. If anybody was watching the NBA Finals, I think it was 2 years ago, Klay Thompson, it might have been Game 6 or Game 7, from a landed dunk, landed awkwardly, but for the reason next season. And so we think about the same with planting, digging a foot into the ground and trying to change direction. It's a lot of forces, and if you don't know how to control your body, it can certainly have an impact on your. That's right. But then we look at other athletes who are maybe more upper extremity athletes. So baseball players, we see a lot of UCL injuries, the Tommy John surgery. And then all sorts of rotator cuff injuries among swimmers and wheelchair athletes. And so protecting those shoulders becomes really important too. There's no shortage of sports injuries. And so we just want to do everything that we can to keep the ones that are in some way preventable out of our hospital.
So speaking about some of those injuries, and I know you talked about upper body injuries and lower body injuries and more sports specific stuff. What are some of, for those athletes who are going to watch this webinar who, are used to having some of those lower body injuries, who are doing, track-based sports, or, are athletes who are used to doing, their sport predominantly with upper body muscles? What are some of the tips to kind of avoid injury that you have?
Yeah, just take your time and master the way that you move. If you watch some of the NBA games as they come on, it's crazy how athletic some of these men are, and when the WNBA finally gets rolling too. I mean, they're such great athletes, but there is this kind of forgotten piece, which is landing with control. I know it probably sounds like a broken record. But if we focus maybe just a little bit less on, style, trying to shoot deep threes, if we just focus on the fundamentals, get into an athletic position, don't let your knees cave in together, just take care of your body, be a master of your body, forget the basketball, the way that gymnasts do, really. I mean, gymnasts are scored on their technique, but basketball players are scored by if the ball goes in the basket or not, or football players are scored by if they get across the goal line. So use that same mentality that a gymnast uses and try to land with control every time. I mean, imagine if Simone Biles didn't have to land with control to get great scores. She would just be kind of flying all over the gym. Or imagine if basketball players did have to land with control. We wouldn't have a pile up under the basket after every breakaway. It kind of seems like this crazy cycle that keeps happening. Somebody steals the balls on a breakaway, and then they're landing on top of the cameraman and the people in the first row. What if we just controlled our body in the first place, so that we don't end up limping off the court with two teammates kind of helping us get to the athletic training room?
Jimmy, if I could just add from viewing a lot of the content that you provide to everybody, some of your videos do kind of place the importance on the mental aspect, the neuromuscular training and such. And athletes are used to having to focus on the mental as well as the physical aspect of the sport. But I don't know how much time they spend on while they're actually training with each rep or each drill or each exercise, to really pay attention to alignment and creating stability with, accessing their core a little bit more often, focusing on those kinds of things. So the program is great in terms of that kind of thing where you really get people involved mentally in it as well as physically.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. I think of, as an athlete, let's say any basketball players that are watching, I mean, you've had your coach talk about your elbow position or the way that you follow through with a shot. If you're a soccer player, you certainly have coaches that are pointing to the specific square inch of space on your cleat where they want you to, be driving the ball from. But nobody really talks when you're running about what position your head is in unless you run track and field. But for all of our soccer, lacrosse, field hockey, basketball players who don't get that instruction, well, then how do you know how to run the right way? So that's exactly what this program is for, to put a couple of very qualified exercise physiologists right in front of you, talking you through all the cues that you need to do these fundamental skills with good technique.
Yeah, you take something like the ready position that you mentioned earlier, and all coaches coach the ready position, and it might be a little different for each sport. But I don't think when they're coaching that, they're looking at alignment and such, and seeing how it's important to come into that ready position with that deceleration, that proper deceleration, and getting yourself lined up, so that your lower body particularly is in a safe position.
Great. So this is another Q&A that comes with it. Does the 30-day challenge offer meals/dieting regimens, or is it just workouts? If not, what do you recommend towards that information that would best go with this 30-day challenge?
It does not have any sort of dietary recommendations. That's just not our area of expertise. I think the best advice I could give would be to speak to a registered dietitian, or to use something like the food pyramid or My Plate, because those are going to be the best places for you to get resources. But I'm sure even at your university, your respective university's health center, I'm pretty sure that there would be some of those resources, like registered dietitians, that are able to provide much more individualized guidance.
So on the lines of that, we have another question in regards to nutrition. What is the role of nutrition? What is the role of nutrition on physical improvement, and how an athlete should balance what he or she eats?
Well, I think it plays a very important role, and I think we're all pretty acutely aware of how important it is. Sometimes it's a bit harder to understand why it's important, but it goes back to the recovery that Bob was talking about. It's also our source of energy. So in order for our body to recover from those difficult training sessions or games, we need some sort of fuel. And so, of course, nutrition plays an important role there. But it provides energy for those training sessions and competitions. And so having our body well fueled is going to actually give our brain more control of what our muscles are doing. So think about maybe those times where you've been running from one class to the next, and you go to practice and you haven't had enough to eat. You feel lightheaded. Maybe you have the shakes, or you just don't feel great during practice. Imagine trying to do any sort of exercise or sport with good control of your body if you're so hungry that you can't function normally. So from our perspective, being well fueled is what allows you to control your body. If you're not, your body is kind of in energy saving mode, just like your computer does when it runs out of battery.
Bob, would you care to comment on that, the question on nutrition?
Just everything that Jimmy said about, if you don't, replace what you've used up, you're gonna slowly run down, and after a period of time, you're not going to have the energy to do your workout. A lot of athletes do the protein supplement. Yeah, you have to have some sort of fuel in there for the exercise.
So this is a question that I would it's kind of a personal question I would ask. So what is your guys' opinion on supplements? And I think a lot of kind of that GNC vitamin shop culture of athletes just trying to grab, whether it's a pre-workout or something for recovery. What would be your thoughts?
I pretty much limit it to, I'm not big on single vitamin supplements, multivitamins, okay, protein before or after a workout, and then eat a balanced meal like Jimmy suggested. You can go to the myplate.gov, enter your food content, and get a complete report on how balanced your diet is and whether or not you're getting enough, carbohydrates, proteins, and even fat, and all the other different vitamins and minerals that you're supposed to have. You'll get a complete printout with that, and you can track yourself, and by tracking it, usually that helps you improve your diet also.
Okay, thank you. Jimmy, do you have anything you'd like to add into that?
I would just, again, probably suggest seeing a registered dietitian. I think they're probably the best person to make that sort of advice. And there is a difference between a registered dietitian and other sort of nutrition practitioners. But registered dietitians are the type that they've gone through full undergraduate degrees, and most of them now soon will require a master's degree. And so that's what we use at the hospital, and so I would say that's probably the standard that I would recommend everyone follow.
Okay, so putting my coaching hat on, we'll finish with this question, and thank you guys for joining us this morning and be such knowledgeable panelists for our student athletes. The mental side of training, right? I know me as a former far I could go, but when I started working with a sports psychologist, I found a different level, kind of that I was able to get to with processing it. What are your thoughts on, working with a sports psychologist, and then speak a little bit to the mental side of things? This is obviously a tricky time for our student athletes, and being able to, kind of focus on what's ahead of them.
I would just say that from a mental health standpoint, exercise is really, really important. It just gives you an extra set of confidence. You feel good about yourself because you know that you've taken care of your body and that you've done something. A lot of people get that, that great feeling after they exercise. Some do, some don't. But anybody that's doing it on a regular basis, when they miss their workout, and maybe some of our athletes are feeling that way now because they haven't been able to work out like they normally can, that's going to, kind of wear them down mentally. So, the sooner that we can get them back to some sort of regular routine, I think that would be a big help. As far as, sports psychologists go, I think they have a good role to play. The getting yourself mentally prepared to compete is really important, and they can help in that regard.
Great, thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I think everything we've talked about today hopefully will contribute to improved mental health, besides the physical benefits that Bob and I have been talking about. But if you have access to someone like a sports psychologist, I think they can be a tremendous resource. But you can also, of course, seek out any other sort of therapist. Like we said early in this, we're talking to students first, athletes second, and so if you see yourself as a student or a person before you see yourself as an athlete, making sure that your mental health is top priority is very important.
Okay, well, thank you guys very much for your time. I want to encourage all the viewers to go check out this 30-day challenge. I think this is a great thing to get our student athletes back moving in the right direction towards competition. Thank you guys very much, and thank you for everyone who joined us today on Talk About It Tuesday with CUNY Athletics, and we will see you next week.